Tonight I want to focus on this week's Brit Hadashah portion, which was John chapter 13. In verse 1, it was just before the festival of Pesach, and Yeshua knew that the time had come for him to pass from this world to the Father. Having loved his own people in the world, he loved them to the end. Now this is the day right before he's going to die. It's literally hours before Judas betrays him in his death. But he loves them to the end. His focus isn't on what's about to happen to him, but it's on caring for them. In verse 4, he rose from the table, removed his outer garments, and wrapped a towel around his waist. He poured water in a basin and began to wash the feet of the Talmudim and wipe them off with the towel wrapped around him. So what's happening here, people in the lower class usually only wore a loincloth, and slaves often worked naked. So by him taking off his outer garments, he's not just trying to keep them from getting wet. He's lowering himself to that of a servant. The roads were dusty, and they only had sandals to wear, so anytime they went inside somewhere, there was always a slave to wash their feet. And anyone in here who's ever worn Crocs or other sandals in the middle of the summer, you're familiar with how gross and nasty your feet get, and they don't just stink, they stink. They're nasty. So this wasn't something that anybody wanted to be their job. This was uniquely that of a servant, of the lowest servant. Yet here is Yeshua washing the disciples' feet. Just days before this, in Matthew 20, he says, "Whoever among you wants to be a leader must become your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve." Philippians 2:7 says that he emptied himself, in that he took the form of a slave by becoming like human beings are. And when he appeared as a human being, he humbled himself still more by becoming obedient even to death. He emptied himself. He gave us his all. Apologize. Just a couple of weeks ago, the majority of the world celebrated his birth. He came here as a baby, both fully human and fully divine. He had to learn how to walk. He had to learn how to talk. He was completely helpless. This is an overwhelming reality that should fill you with awe, gratitude, and praise. No other supposed deity has ever lowered themselves to our level. Mark 10:45 says, "For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." We're supposed to serve God, but here he is saying, "I'm here to serve you." We can all be selfish, jealous, prideful, and arrogant. And the disciples were no different. I think sometimes, or at least for me, you think, oh, well, these are the chosen men that Yeshua picked, right? To stand by him, to watch all of these miracles, firsthand knowledge. But they're men just like we are, and they have their faults. And in the parallel passage to this in Luke 22, which depicts the exact same, night before his death, they're arguing over who is the greatest among them. I mean, can you imagine sitting with Yeshua and you're arguing over who's better? But even so, Yeshua loved them to the end. The Greek word used here means to perfection. He showed them over and over again his love up until his death. When he was arrested, he made sure that his disciples weren't. He says, "I'm Yeshua. Leave them alone." And in chapter 19, when he saw his mother standing there at the foot of the cross, he made sure that she was taken care of and that someone took her and cared for her in their home. He was consumed with love, caring for them and making sure they had what they needed. He continued that while on the cross. He was showing his love. He cared for that criminal beside him. Now, he's nailed to the cross at this time. He's already been tortured and he's in agony. He's not far from death. But he's also crying out, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He is caring for even the people who are doing this to him. He's showing us that love requires more than words. Back to John 13, we get to verse 6, and Peter says, surely you're not going to wash my feet. And he says, you don't understand yet what I'm doing, but in time you'll understand. And Peter says, no, you'll never wash my feet. And he answered him, if I don't wash you, you have no share with me. So then Peter says, well, not just my feet, wash my hands and my head too, right? He's appalled, he's embarrassed, shocked to see Yeshua lower himself as a slave to wash his feet. Wasn't he supposed to come as a king? But Yeshua's telling him that if he couldn't understand what he's doing right now, how is he going to understand what he's about to do on the cross? Peter wants him to wash all of him. Don't stop at my feet. I want all of the blessing, all of what you have to offer. Verse 12, after he had washed their feet, taken back his clothes and returned to the table, he said to them, do you understand what I've done to you? You call me Rabbi and Lord, and you're right, because I am. Now if I, the Lord and Rabbi, have washed your feet, you should also wash each other's feet. For I have set you an example so that you may do as I have done for you. This is an example of what love looks like. To serve, to do the unexpected, the stooping down low, laying your life down, caring for others. It's not always fun to serve or convenient. We're busy with school, we've got work, we've got family, we've got football games. When we get home from work, we just want to, jump in bed and just relax. And when we're off work, we've got a mile-long list of things that we already have to take care of. We don't have time. We don't have the energy. But if Yeshua can take the time to love and serve us, even when he's nailed to the cross, tortured and suffering, we can take 5 minutes out of our day to call or text a friend. We can bring food to our neighbors. If you don't have money or food to bring, then bless them with your time. Meet them at the park and talk while your children play. Mow the grass or fix the leaky faucets at an elderly widow's home. Sit with them while they wait in a doctor's office to hear the results from a test. My neighbor is faithful to share food with us all the time. We come home and there's watermelons or loaves of bread, boxes of tomatoes sitting on our porch. Whenever she sees a sale, she always buys extra so she can share it with us. Recently, when we were struggling and we didn't know how we were going to be able to buy groceries that week. We had food. It was probably just going to be a lot of beans. But she brought us a whole box full of food. And not one, not two, but 3 turkeys. She didn't know that money was tight for us. She didn't know that we were struggling. But she loves us and she wanted to bless us. When Robert was in the hospital, which, by the way, it's been 5 years since his stroke now, on the 11th, praise God. When he was in the hospital, we were blessed with food and money, people offering to watch our kids or just sit with us and have a drink while I poured my heart out. At that time, we had just started coming back here. We had went like a whole 1.5 year stretch where we didn't go anywhere. We needed a break to figure out, really what we believed and where we belonged. And during that time, some new people showed up, the ushers and Blake and Sherry and Noah and Courtney, and we didn't know who they were. And a lot of the people like Glenn and everybody, Pat and Amy, we hadn't kept in touch with them. So at this point in time, I felt like we were going to walk through this alone. That I didn't feel like we really had people who cared enough to reach out. But I was so wrong. We had people not only here, but people we hadn't seen or talked to in years show up for us. We had people we didn't know show up. A friend of a friend sat with me at the hospital and prayed with me the entire time he was in surgery. She was there for 8 hours. And I had never even heard her name before that day. Others I had never met came personally to the hospital to sit and talk with me and bring me a meal. A preacher we didn't know came up there at least twice to pray with us just because of one of my friends had lifted us up at her church. A whole group of this prayer group got together and collected gift cards and money so that we could buy groceries. When he was hospitalized again last year and my stepmom died the same day, friends showed up again and they brought us so much food that we didn't have to worry about food for like 2 weeks. And I'm not talking about just food for me and my boys. We had food for my dad, my 2 brothers, my sister, all of my nieces and nephews. We didn't have to worry about anything. And the reason I chose to talk about this tonight is because this week I found this. Well, not this week, it was probably like last week or something. And I found it right when I was reading. This was made for us a couple months ago by the grandmother. Isn't it beautiful? By the grandmother of one of the football players. She lives in North Carolina. Not only have I never met her, I barely could tell you who the boy was. And I'd only spoken to his mom a couple of times. But she lifted Joey up when he was going through that moment where he couldn't play football and we weren't sure, and we still are waiting on answers. And she shared her prayer request to her mom states away, and she made this for us. It's handmade, or at least with her own machine. It wasn't bought. And she gave us a beautiful prayer and letter. And this is something I can hold on to forever and remember that I'm not alone. Not only do I have people, but I have God. All of these people, I'm not sharing this to boast and, oh, we're so awesome. We got lots of wonderful people, which we do. Y'all are among them. But all of these people showed a true servant's heart. They showed what it meant to love, not just in words, but in action. They did the unexpected. They showed up, even for someone they didn't know, and they served. To take time out of our schedule to love like this takes effort. It's a daily picking up our cross, denying ourselves, and following Him. I've often felt not good enough, not worthy. I tend to be shy and introverted. My anxiety kicks in, and though I want to be with people, sometimes the idea of being with people stresses me out. But I've come to the realization that my introversion and fear of what others may think of me is a pathetic reason not to reach out, not to take time out of my day to check on those that I love, to be the hands and feet that we are called to be. Verse 15 says that a slave is no greater than his master. Yeshua did all of this for us. He loved them. He loves us to perfection. The master of the universe came to earth as a human. He lowered himself not only to our level, but even lower. If he is our Lord and King, then we should follow his example and love others to perfection. Some people have never read the Bible and they're watching you. They're watching to see. And some who have, they've become bitter about religion. I read this quote by Francis Chan. We need to stop giving people excuses not to believe in God. You've probably heard the expression, I believe in God, just not organized religion. I don't think people would say that if the church truly lived like we are called to live. 1 Corinthians 13, I may speak in the tongues of men, even angels, but if I lack love, I've become merely blaring brass or a cymbal clanging. I may have the gift of prophecy, I may fathom all mysteries, know all things, have all faith, enough to move mountains, but if I lack love, I am nothing. I may give away everything I own, I may even hand over my body to be burned, but if I lack love, I gain nothing. I pray that He will give us malleable hearts that break for what breaks His, and that loves like He loves. How will you influence someone this week to take a second look at Yeshua by loving and serving them? What could He do through us if we were a living offering? Our lives are as a vapor, here today and gone tomorrow. Let us make our moments count. Let our lives and our love be an act of worship to God.